Blog Talk Radio.
Thanks for tuning in to Fire Engineering Talk Radio. Each week, our host will introduce you to a various cast of characters you will only find here. Each host will share experience, knowledge, and expertise regarding their years in the fire service, allowing you to call in and speak with them live, an experience you can only find on Fire Engineering Talk Radio. So thanks for joining us. Enjoy and stay safe.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Fire Engineering Talk Radio and another installment of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. I am your host, Tom Merrill, and I'm very excited to be back on the Internet radio this evening. I haven't been on since FDIC back in April. Had a lot of things going on, a lot of traveling, a lot of family time, and it's great to be back home and to be back on talking with all of you about the great professional volunteer fire service and what's going on, the challenges, the success stories. And again, our main focus at being professional does not mean that you have to bring home a paycheck. It's all about attitude and commitment and dedication, how we treat people both inside our firehouse, outside the firehouse, how we prepare, how we train. That equates to a true professional. And it's your show. Feel free to call in. Feel free to talk about your volunteer fire experience, your challenges, what's going on in your firehouse. Feel free to call in to our guests this evening if you have questions about the grant writing process. And again, that number to call in if you're interested is 1-760-454-8852, 760-454-8852. We would love to hear from you. And hey, as a reminder, tonight's show is sponsored by Honeywell and DuPont Kevlar, and together with them, we have some really, really exciting news. They have combined to award 20 full scholarships to attend FDIC 2017, which will be in April, and this is a full ride. It's going to cover airfare, it's going to cover lodging, it'll cover food, and it'll go on from there. Honeywell and DuPont Kevlar are combining to award 20 firefighters and first responders with this full paid scholarship for FDIC 2017, which will be April 18th to the 23rd next year. For information, you can go on the FDIC website. You can get a link to it from the Fire Engineering website, and we are so thankful to both Honeywell and DuPont Kevlar for sponsoring that. That is a tremendous deal and something that should be taken advantage of in your department if you have some members that are deserving to go to FDIC and maybe don't have the funds to send them. We're going to get right into the show this evening. A lot of times I do like to usually spend some time going over current events, what's going on in the fire service, but we're under a little bit of a time constraint tonight, and I want to get right into tonight's show. Because it's an important topic, a topic that just, again, is in the headlines because it's firefighter grant period. The Assistance to Firefighter grant period is going to be opening on Tuesday, October 11th. So that sparked some interest from me to reach out to some experts in the field of grant writing, because grants can play a huge, huge role in helping a fire department's operation. They're a great way for departments to receive funding, maybe beyond the means of their budget. Times are tough. Times continue to be tough for the fire service. Budgets are tight, and grants can certainly help bridge the gap between maybe a department's resources and what it needs. And so I brought some experts on tonight to talk about it, because it can be a daunting task. It can also be a scary task for those that aren't familiar with the process. It can be intimidating. So I would like to welcome onto the show two experts in the field of grant writing. The first one I'd like to introduce is Jerry Brandt, who is also one of us. He's a volunteer firefighter. He's a life member of the Hope Fire Company, which I believe is in the central PA area. Is that true, Jerry?
Yes.
Yep, in Pennsylvania, and you were served as a chief for 15 years, and I guess now currently a member of the Patent Fire Company, and you serve as a safety officer, and you're a proud 47-year fire service veteran, but you're also a senior grant consultant and a grant writer with Fire Grants Help and EMS Grants Help, and we certainly look forward to talking with you. Unfortunately, you're going to have to leave soon for a fire company meeting, and we certainly know how that is. And along with Jerry, I'm pleased to welcome Liz Finkel as well. She's the East Coast Senior Account Manager and operates a grant division. And Liz, I'd like to welcome you on board. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Now, as you both know, grant writing can be intimidating and it can scare people. But Jerry, wouldn't you agree that grants can certainly be a tremendous benefit for a volunteer fire department in so many ways?
Yes, absolutely. And you touched on a couple of issues there in your introduction. With the dwindling amount of resources that a lot of departments have in these tough economic times, and the increasing costs for apparatus and equipment, just the traditional means of funding these type of things for the fire department are becoming increasingly difficult to do. And so more and more departments are looking at grants as a way to relieve some of that financial stress that they have.
And there's so many out there that we know educated firefighters are probably aware of some of the big ones, such as the FEMA Assistance to Firefighter grant and the SAFER grants and some of the other more well-known ones. But there's also local grants and probably some small, maybe I shouldn't say small, but relatively unknown grants. There's probably a lot of untapped grant potential out there as well.
Yes, over the years, of course, the Assistance to Firefighter grants have suffered a pretty severe cutback. We're at about 50% of where we were 10 years ago. And some of the grants that are available through private foundations and some of the corporations took a hit during the period right after the recession. But they have come back pretty robust and are at dollar figures, where they were prior to the recession, and in some cases even more. So, the AFG grant and related federal programs are certainly one source to look at, but, we've been able to get resources to departments through financial institutions, through insurance companies, through corporations. There are literally a ton of different avenues that could be taken as far as grants are concerned.
How do people even know about that? Is that something then they would have to enlist in maybe like a company you work for to help delve into these files of where these grants are available from?
Well, that's certainly one thing that Fire Grants Help does, is do grant research. Also on our site, you will find information about various grants that, we're aware of that are currently opening. That information will all be out there. There is a foundation center which publishes a directory, and maybe in these digital times I shouldn't use the words publish, but it makes available a foundation directory that literally talks about all of the foundations and corporate giving in the United States, and gives you a good idea of what types of programs they will fund. The other important thing, what amounts they will fund, because there's no use going to a foundation for a $50,000 grant when most of what they give out is $5,000 a year. All of that information, you can get through somewhere like the Foundation Center. The other thing that I tell people is, go to the trade shows. If you find out about a department who has got a grant, give them a call, shoot them an email, say, hey, I heard about your success. Could you tell me a little bit about it? All of these things are places that departments can go to find out information. And the one thing that I'll kind of throw in there as a caveat is, in these days of scams, please don't go by the book that's or to some of these sites that are instantly going to charge you for any information. That really, isn't something that you need to do, because there's enough free information out there that you don't need to get taken in by those kind of things.
So be aware of that. That's a red flag if they want money up front right away before they're even going to maybe help you in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
Now, I know when I talk to firefighters, and Liz, I don't know if you've experienced this as well, but sometimes when you even talk about doing a grant, the initial response from chiefs or presidents of fire companies, or even some of the rank and file, is, oh my gosh, it's not even worth it. It's too cumbersome. It's too bureaucratic. It's too difficult, or I don't have the writing skills. How do we encourage our people to look beyond that and say, hey, there's a good benefit here. Put a little time and effort in, and the company could really reap some reward?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, and it does happen a lot. A lot of departments that have applied over the years, it's easy to get beaten down if you get a no, or you get two no's, or you keep getting it year to year. One thing I know Jerry and I both encourage departments to do is apply for multiple grants at once. And then talk to your community. You never know who you're going to talk to within your community that might be a part of a foundation board, just kind of touching on the foundation side again, or that might run a corporation that has, a program where they donate funds, whether that's to public safety, or if that's, an area they like to give where they're located, so they can see how those funds affects their local community and their employees. So I always encourage departments to keep at it, because you never know who you're going to talk to, and you never know when you're going to get a yes. And that can certainly open a door for a relationship to start with a foundation, as well as even your FEMA reps. Those are great people to just start a conversation with and establish those relationships. It can really, really benefit you in the future, as you continue to apply for grants.
My own department, Liz, you just reminded me that we've had some success in that exact area. One of our newer members happens to work for a company that is in our town, but also in other areas of the United States, and come to find out they like to give out grants to local community organizations, and we were fortunate enough to get a grant from them. And a couple of years ago, we didn't even know they did such a thing. So I think what you raised is an excellent point.
Yeah, it's a great resource, and typically they're right in your backyard. And certainly, I think it's about talking about what you do and the struggles, because not everyone, the public doesn't understand sometimes the financial burden, that comes with the fire service. The equipment is not cheap, and that's something that they don't always know. So talking about those things are really important, just to make your community aware of that.
Right. So now we're going to start with the grant process. And Jerry, is there an organized, methodical method that a couple people can work together on to maybe make the process less cumbersome, or less a little bit easier on them, less bureaucratic? Is there any advice you can give for starting the process, or maybe some common mistakes people made right when they start out?
Well, the big thing that I stress constantly with everyone is planning. We know every year there's going to be an Assistance to Firefighters grant. We know every year that there's going to be a Fire Prevention and Safety grant, a SAFER grant for recruiting and retention. We know that most of the states have volunteer fire assistance funds that come around every year. And, there are other programs that we know that are going to happen. And so why at the beginning of the year when we're doing all of our other things like budgets and alarm cards and, other things like that, don't we sit down and start to plan for that year's grant, even though maybe it's not going to open till, July or September or something. We can start doing that planning ahead of time, because having good statistics and good information to back your grant up is what you need. Simply going in and saying, hey, we're from a small rural department and we don't have any money, so we want $400,000 for a new engine, isn't going to get you anywhere, because there are a ton of people saying that same thing. Now, sitting down and saying, okay, we have our fire reports from the previous year sitting in front of us. Let's look at them. Gosh, you know what? Over the past 3 years, the number of structure fires that we're going to have risen by 25%. So right away, our apparatus is being utilized more. Things like turnout gear and FCBA are also being utilized more. Where did those things stand in our department? Are we up to date on them? Let's take a look at them. Let's do an inventory. Gosh, and then we discover, because one of the questions that AFG asks you, if you're looking for new turnout gear, you're looking for new inventory, for new FCBA, how old is the inventory that you have? So doing all of this up front helps to lay a very strong foundation for your application. The other thing that ties right into that is knowing your demographics. What's the population of your coverage area? Look at things like the median household income, poverty levels, unemployment. Have there been plant closings in your area, layoffs, anything that could help to, make your application and stand out. And just because, as I said earlier, simply saying we don't have the money to do it, isn't going to get you funded. Saying we don't have the money to do it, and here's the reason why we don't have the money to do it, and here's the information that backs that up, that makes your application more competitive. Now, please don't think that you have to be poor to apply for grants. The other side of that is, gosh, we're living in an area that's growing like crazy, and because of that, our number of calls have gone from this to this over the past couple of years. The number of structure fires or the number of motor vehicle accidents are increasing drastically, and cite those numbers. And that's the reason why we're seeking financial assistance to replace our 25-year-old hydraulic rescue tools. It makes it a lot simpler if you've got that information and you have the time to plan this, get cost estimates, because you can't just apply for question mark. I don't care what grant it is, they're going to ask for the amount of money that you're asking for. All of those things you can do up front, and all of those things help you to have a lot better application, and you're not kind of running around like crazy at the last minute saying, oh my gosh, AFG is going to open in 2 weeks. What are we going to apply for this year?
So start early. It definitely is, some work involved there, but if you start early enough in that and do a little bit at a time, when the opening comes, the application time comes, then hopefully you're better prepared and ready to go. And that's some good information. And one thing you said there really hit home with me, because that is a common phrase I've heard, that you don't have to be poor to apply for a grant. There are many people that think that they don't have a prayer for a grant because they're maybe not a poor department, maybe they're decently funded or even well funded, so they won't even consider applying for a grant. But in your estimation, they still, if they make a strong case, they could possibly still secure a grant, correct?
Correct. It's having that information, painting that picture. The thing to constantly remember is that the peer review panel that's going to look at this is going to be somebody that knows absolutely nothing about you. They could be somebody from the other side of the country. They're picking this up. They have about 20 minutes to read it. So you've got to be, as complete in, that character limit as you can. And, as I said, being able to cite good, hard facts really stands out.
Have you seen any companies that have another mistake I believe I've seen and read about is when people will apply for a grant and totally misestimate the actual cost of what it is they're trying to get. And I've heard of people that have gotten a grant but then realized the equipment they were getting was much more than what the grant was for, so they've actually had to forfeit the grant. I guess that would fall into the planning stages as well. Know what it is you need to get and how much it's going to cost.
Yes, having a good cost estimate, is essential to your grant, and that's why I'm saying start early. Then you have the time to go to trade shows. You have the time to do research. You have the time to get those things put together, and as opposed to if you start calling once the AFG period is open, some of these vendors are also getting hundreds of other phone calls, and so you're not going to be able to get the kind of attention that you need, and that's something to certainly consider from the beginning. Is okay. We're looking at this, and it's whatever the project is, it's going to cost us $100,000. We're going to need X amount of dollars to match that. Where is our match coming from? Do we have match available? And if we should, miss our mark a little bit on the estimate, do we have some money in case we need to spend a few extra dollars on this? If you don't have the money to make the match, don't apply, because all you're going to do is waste your time and really get yourself into a situation where you look bad to your community because you'll get the big splash that the XYZ fire company is getting $100,000 for new SCBA, and 6 to 8 months down the road, somebody's asking, "Hey, whatever happened to that SCBA grant?" Oh, well, we had to turn it down because we couldn't come up with a match for it.
So again, there is in the planning process, know what the match is going to require and make sure that your funds are there for the match. Another big red flag with grant mistakes that I guess have been made over the years. Any others? I know you have to leave in a few minutes. Any other major mistakes that you're seeing in this grant writing process or this grant application process that people are making? They may not prepare and they may scramble right at the opening of the grant application, and that can set them back. They may not have the necessary quotes on the equipment or whatever they're looking to get. That will set them back. And not having matching funds available will certainly set them back. What other mistakes are you seeing made out there?
Well, I mean, one thing in general that we tell people is, make sure that you're eligible. I mean, we've kind of been focusing on the AFG grant here, but as we talked about earlier, there are all these other programs out there through foundations and corporations. Look at the eligibility criteria. Some of them will want you to be a nonprofit organization, meaning you need a 501 certification from the IRS. If you don't have that, don't apply because they are going to request that documentation. And again, all it's going to do is waste people's time, make you look bad if you go through that. Something else when you're doing your narratives and you're finished, please get someone who knows nothing about this to read them. I had a department who I think when I hung the phone up, I probably could have heard them cry from about 5 states away. but they could not understand why they didn't get funded for this project. And I went through, and it's like I'm looking at everything, and I'm thinking, boy, I agree with you. You know, you're really putting together a great application. And then I read the first sentence of their financial need narrative, and the first sentence said that the ABC Fire Company can afford to do this project on their own, instead of can't.
Oh, wow. Big typo.
Big typo. Again,
make sure you review
early,
that.
Start early, get another set of eyes to look at something like that. And, those little things, when somebody like AFG gets 10,000 applications and they only fund about 2,000, so there's a 20% chance of you getting funded, those little things mean a lot between, you getting this score and you getting this score.
Now, you mentioned AFG. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, and I've had people say to me, they're saying, well, gee, for something like that, they should have realized that they wouldn't have written this grant if they were able to do it. I said, but they can't read anything into it. Here's what it says on paper. We can afford to do this.
Right.
So, please get another set of eyes on it.
Yeah, it's good recommendation for a lot of things. Even if you write an article, you've written several articles, and I'm sure it's always good to have someone read those over as well, because you think you've read it 3 or 4 times, and there's still that one glaring typo that someone else picks up on. So great advice. Now, what I'd like to ask both of you is we throw these words out there, SAFER grant, AFG. Yeah, those are the bigger ones. Understand that we can go to local community organizations possibly for grants, but would one of you be able to take this lead and talk about what is a SAFER grant as compared to an AFG? Are there certain stipulations that one can only be used for certain things and the other one can only be used for something different? And that's probably another thing that people need to be aware of when they're applying. Know what they are for. But what these bigger grants, SAFER, AFG, are there guidelines or parameters that they can only be used for certain things?
Yes, and that's really key. Is read the guidelines up front, and I have not seen a guidance document yet that also does not include information for contact people. If you've got a question, call that contact person up. That's why their phone number is in there. Don't be afraid to call them, and don't think that you've got a stupid question. But yeah, the SAFER grant is, for volunteer and combination departments, provides funding for doing recruiting and retention. For career departments, it provides funding to do for hiring new firefighters, whereas the AFG grant is more of the equipment side of it, apparatus, PPE, equipment, wellness and fitness equipment, and building modifications with regard to things like generators, sprinkler systems, and diesel exhaust removal.
And the AFG is the one that I believe is they recently announced the application period for that is going to start in October, and I believe it runs about a month into mid-November. So there's a time period to fill everything out and apply. Is that how it is as well with SAFER? There's just a certain time period that can be applied for?
Yes, and normally with any of those federal programs, they will, open and run usually about 4 to 5 weeks. And
okay, great.
With that, Tom, I've got to say good night and
I understand.
Head off to my meeting.
No, that's the life of a volunteer firefighter, and I certainly appreciate your time. Again, we've been talking with Jerry Brandt, who is a volunteer firefighter, but he's also a senior grant consultant and a grant writer with Fire Grants Help and EMS Grants Help. And Jerry, I know we've only had a little bit of time to spend with you, but I'm sure there's people that will be listening that maybe will have other questions or look to you for some help or guidance. So before you go, could you let people know how they could get a hold of you to continue this conversation?
Sure. They can get a hold of me at jerry.brandt, B-R-A-N-T, at firegrantshelp.com. I also write for firerescue1.com. They can simply go to that site and also get a hold of me through it.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate that, and we will continue the conversation with Liz then, and good luck at your meeting tonight, Jerry.
All right, thanks very much, Tom, and you're in very capable hands now.
Excellent. I know I am. So again, I'd like to welcome Liz Finkel. Liz, you're the East Coast Senior Account Manager. Is it Praetorian? Is that what it is? Praetorian Digital?
Yeah. Yes. So Praetorian Digital.
And they have a grants division?
Yeah, so we're actually, Jerry is a consultant for Praetorian Digital, which is also Fire Grants Help and Fire Rescue One. So we work together, Jerry and I do.
I got you. Why don't you give us a little background on what you do for them? I understand from reading about you a little bit that you are an avid volunteer for some of the local nonprofits and also some national ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've spent some time in Texas. We have an office down in Texas, so I just recently moved to Kansas City, Missouri. So I work here out of my home, and I've been with Fire Grants Help and Fire Rescue One for about 5.5 years. So primarily help departments in the East Coast, the Northeast, kind of in Jerry's lay of the land. So it's wonderful. I love it. So
excellent. Now, Jerry was talking about some of the mistakes maybe people have made, and also some of the lack of prep work. And would anything else you can think of that you've witnessed that people just aren't doing correctly, and what could help them in the grant process?
Yeah, I had a couple of notes actually as Jerry was talking, all about that pre-planning, as Jerry said, and there's actually a couple of administrative items as well as just, knowing what's going on with your department in general and the age of your equipment. There's a new thing that, kind of implemented across the board for federal grants, and it's called SAM registration. It stands for System of Award Management, and any department that wants to apply for a federal grant has to be registered before they apply, and it's free to register for that. It's basically a way for the federal government to track their grant funds. So that's required to
any
apply.
Any federal grant?
It is across the board. It's free to get your department registered, but it is needed to apply. They've been a little bit lenient. Yeah, there's a website. It's just sam.gov, and they actually have some really great sam.gov.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's mandatory to do that for any federal grant.
It is, and they're really cracking down this year. They've been a little bit lenient as it's been kind of turned over and been a new thing they've implemented, but they're really stressing that a lot this year, so that would be a very good thing to get taken care of now, before that AFG cycle opens. It usually takes, once you register, it usually takes about 7 to 10 business days for them to verify. So that's a really great thing for departments to check into and make sure their department's registered. You do have to update it every year, so just go in there once a year and make sure you're all up to date and verify the information, and then you should be good to apply. Okay. And I just want to remind our listeners, Liz, if I just need to remind our listeners that you're listening to Fire Engineering Talk Radio. I am Tom Merrill, and this is the Professional Volunteer Fire Service. And tonight we are talking about fire service grants and some of the do's and some of the don'ts
when it comes to applying for a grant. And we are so fortunate to be sponsored by Honeywell and DuPont Kevlar, sponsoring tonight's show, also awarding 20 full scholarships to FDIC 2017, which will be in Indianapolis from April 24th to the 29th in 2017. And feel free to get some information on the fire engineering website or fire or FDIC. You could Google that, and there's tons of information on that. And we're very fortunate to be sponsored by them, and we thank them very, very much. And again, tonight's episode concentrating on fire service grants, and I am talking with Liz Finkel about the do's and the don'ts and the mistakes people make when it comes to applying for these grants. And if you would like to call in and you have a question for Liz or myself, please feel free. And again, the number to call in is 760-454-8852. And Liz, I said do's and don'ts. Is there anything else that you might have written down about do's and don'ts when it comes to these grants?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to think what else may be a good tip.
Some people just don't know if they're eligible, right? Some just don't know if they're eligible.
It's true. I know. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I guess that just means they got to read the fine print of the grants that they're looking to get.
Yeah, absolutely, hands down. So most of them will have pretty clear language on eligibility. If you're a nonprofit, a 501c3, you can apply. If you're a government entity, sometimes you'll see that on there, which is a lot of fire departments. So they will have clear language, and if they don't, typically they will provide a phone number or an email where you can get in contact with those funders directly and see if you are eligible or if they'd be open to accepting an application from your department.
And make sure that you meet the matching funds portion of the grant if there's a matching fund portion. So there is quite a bit of homework. I don't think we can emphasize that enough, that you really need to do your homework. But that being said, the success stories that are out there are many. I had a local department, Liz, that just was awarded quite a large grant, and they're using it as part of recruitment and retention to help pay tuition for members attending college. I think that's a great idea. They can go to their local schools, high schools, and try and solicit new members that way. But they're also, this is great, Liz, listen to this, they're also saying if there's any older people in the community, not just high school students, but 20, 30, 40-somethings, maybe even 50-somethings, if they want to continue their education for professional development or something like that, the fire company will consider the tuition for that as well. Now, there's minimum qualifications. They have to remain a member for so many years. What a great idea. There's some great ideas out there to use grant money for.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific examples of maybe some that you've helped with, some creative grants that have been applied for and successfully secured for anything unique or interesting, thinking outside the box, not just a fire truck or breathing apparatus?
No, that's awesome. That SAFER grant really allows for some creativity like that, to give people stipends or incentives to, be within the department. That one you can really get creative, and that's a really good example of that. We've also seen under SAFER, as part of a recruitment retention for volunteers, is to provide on-site babysitting for some of their volunteers. We've seen that before, which is really creative and a really good incentive for a lot of these volunteers who are, coming after their jobs. Of course, you guys know that. So I've seen that be funded. I'm trying to think what else. There's been a plethora. There's been a lot lately, too.
But it doesn't always have to just be equipment.
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, sometimes with some grants that you'll see, they won't just flat out say this funds PPE. Sometimes it'll say this will fund community development. So that could cover a plethora of items. It could cover a wide range. So you can really get creative with some of those grants that say we're looking to fund education, we're looking to fund community development and enhancement of safety. There's a lot of things that could fall under that umbrella, so you can really kind of tailor your request to what the funders are looking for, which is really what you should be doing when you're applying for those grants that are like that.
Yeah, and I did hear of some of the babysitting ideas, not just for a training night where members could bring their children to the firehouse or a community center where these babysitters would be, but also for major calls. I've heard of departments that have issued pagers or radios to select people that are going to respond they set the parameters as to what would be considered maybe a major call, but then these firefighters who maybe otherwise would be home with children can respond to the call and their children are being safely watched. I think that's an excellent idea, and I've heard of grants being used to help fund physical fitness equipment or even memberships for departments if they don't have their own in-house fitness room. Maybe they go out to a local fitness center in their area, and I've heard of grants paying for things like that as well. I've heard of simple things, just bringing some companies up into the modern day of not just when they're training and drilling, there's still companies using overhead projectors and maybe some older technology because their limited funds have had to be used for other more important things, but they need to be able to have computer projectors and project PowerPoints and training DVDs or training videos, and I've heard of grants being used for that. So I guess if you have a need at your firehouse, there's probably a grant out there that can maybe help get that for you. It might not be a federal one, but what you said at the very beginning was excellent. There's a lot of local organizations that are able and willing to help out their volunteers.
Absolutely, and that's probably the best piece of advice I could give is certainly fire departments are out in their community already, but really just having those conversations with people. It's amazing, who you'll talk to and never know they're a part of a foundation board or a large corporation that gives funding, and they could be the one to approach you. Wouldn't that be awesome? So I always encourage departments to talk with just their community about what's going on because it's really the best way to connect and open some doors for funding.
And if it is intimidating for people, if people wanted to go out and get some help, is that where a company such as yours can help provide guidance and provide resources? Why don't you tell us a little bit about what some of these grant companies can do? And also, Jerry mentioned, some of the red flags when it comes to grant companies. So maybe you could explain a little bit about how a company such as yours could help a fire department in the grant process, and also at the same time say if there's any other red flags they should be concerned of.
Sure. Yeah, so Fire Grants Help and Fire Rescue One. So I know a lot of departments are familiar with Fire Rescue One, which is an online publication. We do daily news and training videos as well. We have a plethora of things that we do on that website. And then through that, we have Fire Grants Help. So we provide departments free resources up on our website. So Jerry is a columnist, and he is often seen on there. He's really our in-house expert. So you'll see a lot of really great articles from some of our grant writers, which will sometimes walk you through some of those those basics and just give you a baseline understanding of, what to expect, as well as just some good pointers. So, we've got articles up on there which are free. We also have some free grant research available to departments and other resources. And then we have grant writing services. Jerry actually writes grants as well for us. So we do a lot with departments, and we're from California to Maine, so we cover all the U.S. and we've helped secure about close to $90 million in funding for fire departments across the board. So we have a lot of really great people just like Jerry who are experts in the fire service and really providing and being a tool to all those departments. So that's kind of what we do. And then red flags, going back to sam.gov, it's a free registration. So there are companies out there that will charge you if you want them to set it up for you, but it is free. So that's something to be aware of. Anytime, with those red flags, I would just say check your sources. If you're ever unsure, I would encourage you to call us. We're a pretty good filter for some of those things that are going on. I have a lot of departments that I've worked with for years that have called me with questions like that if they're not sure if something is real or valid, and I always let them forward emails to me or just tell me what's been going on and try to put them in touch with an expert if I don't know if something is red flagged. So that's
now,
a good.
Could someone call you and just say,
resource.
would someone be able to call you and just say, we've identified a need in our firehouse, a piece of equipment that we need to purchase, but we don't even know maybe what direction to go in or what grant to apply for? Would that be something that you could set them in the direction and say, well, that sounds like it would be good for the SAFER grant, or that might be good for the local, or you don't know all the community ones out there, but it might be good for the AFG grant. Would you be a good starting point to send someone in the right direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's how most of our conversations start, to be honest. If a department hasn't gotten in touch with us, we also have a grants hotline that they can call, and we can get them connected with the regional rep, for me, Northeast, but they can call and absolutely ask us questions.
Absolutely. Excellent. And then for all the grants, is there a standard process that we go through? Is it identify the need, do the homework, that we understand, be prepared, but there's a narrative that goes into it, an application that goes into it. Is it a pretty standard process, or does it differ between the different grants?
There are definitely things that are similar, and you hit those. Narrative, application, and kind of pre-planning is really a basic process for all the grants, but they do differ on what they require. Some grants will require additional attachments or documents, like proof of your tax status, or they want a list of board of directors. So they do vary. The base or the foundation is really that narrative application, and then from there, each individual grant can really request or require whatever they'd like. So you hit it on the head.
Can you apply for more than
though.
one? Can you
Absolutely.
And what if
can
you apply for the same thing for more than one grant because you don't know if you're going to get it? Say I want to purchase some SDBA, and I apply to a couple different entities for the grant, and I'm successful with one, and then someone else comes through with the money. Obviously, can't use it for something else. Correct? You have to use it what you applied for.
Yes, that's correct. So you can absolutely apply for multiple grants at once for the same thing. And say, you do get funded, by both, say it's two foundations. They both have agreed to, award you for that same project. Sometimes you can go back to those organizations and let them know, hey, this department or this organization has agreed to support our request. However, we would really love to continue working with you. We do also have another project that is really a need within our department. Would you consider, funding us for that? So certainly, there's some ways around it if you do get funded by two different organizations. It's always good to have that open dialogue with them before turning a grant down. You can always ask. The worst you'll hear is probably no. So,
and that just means establish a good relationship
absolutely
with that organization. Now, after the grant, say you've been successful getting a grant, are there certain stipulations, requirements, paperwork that need to be done that show that you've received whatever it is you've got the grant for, and it was within the limits of the grant, and it's not just here's a check, here you go, is it?
Exactly. It's not free money. You didn't win the lottery. You still have to submit taxes, so to speak. So yes, with most of these grants, before you apply, if you're reading through the guidance or the NOFO, the Notice of Funding announcement is sometimes what it's referred to, that outlines the whole entire grant. And what's included in that is typically post-award management. So you get $100,000. That's fantastic. You're not off the hook. You definitely have your money, but what comes along with a lot of grants is reporting requirements. And that would include things like Jerry had mentioned, your matching funds, making sure that the grant awardee is aware of where those are coming from. That would also include submitting semi-annual reports. So you do, with some of these grants, especially with FEMA grants, you do have to submit your budgets. And they really do that for checks and balances reasons. They want to make sure you're spending the money the way you said you were going to be spending it. You don't want to get audited, and they come to find out you bought, a bicycle for some of your volunteers. So there are reporting requirements, that you have to comply with once you guys, once departments receive those awards. And that's always before you sign your award letter and accept those funds. It's always a great idea to read through those terms and make sure that you guys, the department's going to comply with all of those things that are required.
Gotcha. I'd like to remind our listeners that this is Fire Engineering Talk Radio, and I am Tom Merrill, and this evening's installment of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. I am talking with Liz Finkel, the East Coast Senior Account Manager for Praetorian Digital, and they have a grant division. You do police grants as well, and fire grants, and EMS?
We
and
do.
A whole plethora,
we do it. And local government and, education, yes, absolutely.
Wow.
We do it all. Yeah.
And if anyone would like to call in, we're gonna wrap things up here in a minute. But if anyone has a question regarding grants, please feel free to call in. Again, the number 760-454-8852. And Liz, do all the grants have a matching funds requirement?
That's a good question. No, they do not. So some of the great thing about some of those local foundation grants is often they don't always have the red tape or the strings attached like some of the federal and state grants. So some grants have matches, most of the federal and state. Most of the time with foundation grants, and not all the time, there's no match. So that can definitely be beneficial for departments.
Right. But they all need to, I would imagine, even for a local one, even if it's not required. I would think, folks, it adds to the professional equation to have good cost estimates. Here's the piece of equipment we've identified that we want. Here is proven cost. In other words, official quotes, correct? I would imagine at the federal level you definitely need that.
Yes, correct. Yeah, we want those departments to follow any type of procurement they have, especially once they're awarded. But yes, prior to the grants, estimates up to 3, if not more, if they want to get those, just so that they know how much funding they're going to need to request on the grant application.
Yeah, all the more reason, again, to do your homework, be prepared, and not just say, oh, the grant opening is today. Oh, gosh, now we have to do all this work. Maybe you can have a lot of that done ahead of time. And be thinking about be thinking about it when you're out in the community, because like you said, you never know who's out there that belongs to is on a board or a foundation that can help your department out.
Yes.
So get the word out there. Liz, is there anything else that you can say to our listeners to better prepare them, to help them be better prepared to file for a grant and to avoid the many mistakes that have been made? And any final thoughts you would like to provide?
Yeah, I mean, now is your time, especially if you're thinking AFG is a program you guys, departments want to tackle. I would say September is the best month to start making sure you're registered with SAMS, you've got your DUNS number, you've got your FEMA login and password squared away. And certainly, don't be afraid to ask questions. There's so many departments that I work with that this is a first time applying for a grant. There's so many resources available, online that you can utilize now that, certainly prepare and do your research and don't be afraid to reach out for assistance. Organizations like Fire Grants Help and Fire Rescue One, that's what we're set up to do, is to assist with that process. So, I know we keep hitting it, but prepare early, and now is certainly your time. And if you do miss an application cycle, know that most of the time it will open again the following year. So start planning even if you miss an application cycle.
And I thought it was neat, too, how Jerry mentioned, or maybe it was you, I apologize, but if you see a fire company was successful getting a grant, certainly discuss with them how they did it and the steps they took.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many departments will get on the phone with me and say, Liz, the department next door, they get grants all the time. I don't understand why we can never get grants. And departments don't even think to go and talk, and what a valuable resource. And that is, Jerry said that, and it is absolutely true, because if a local foundation is supporting a department next door, they certainly would consider, supporting you as well. So that's a great point, Tom. Yeah.
And you know what I was thinking too is I'm thinking about this whole process. Firefighters, the human person is so good at just filling in name, department name, address. That's the easy part. I know from my experience that what's the most intimidating part? It has to be that narrative. It has to be.
Oh, yes,
but it's probably
absolutely.
It's probably a very important part, too, isn't it?
Yeah, no one wants to write, when you sit down to write, no one wants to write a term paper. Sometimes that's what I compare it to. You can fill in the bubble sheet, but then you get to the essay portion, and it can be good or bad depending on the person. Some people love being able to say, okay, here's our numbers, that's great, but here's what's really going on. And it is about, like Jerry had mentioned, really presenting the data that you input. You can say you can look at the data and then say our call data for structures fires really increased 20% in the last year, which is a huge amount. So you're right. Narratives can sometimes be very, very intimidating depending on the person, but, certainly we can help. I know a really good resource. I don't know if it's just the area that I cover, but a lot of firefighters that I work with, they know teachers, right? Teachers within their community. Those are great people to, kind of try and get to advocate for your department or, help with the writing portion. I have a lot of departments that do that, and that's often a really good local resource that, that can help the department too.
And you might have a teacher in your ranks. You might have a volunteer firefighter who's a teacher, or somebody that is a good writer. So just because you're the one that maybe is leading the charge to apply for the grant and maybe taking the bull by the horns and really doing a lot of the initial work and putting in the time and effort, maybe that doesn't mean you're the one that's going to do the final narrative. Maybe someone that's a little stronger. Certainly provide them with the information, help them with the information, provide the main points, but let that person who's a little more talented with the writing skills take and run with it. Because I think, and Liz, maybe you can verify that, from what I've read about grants, the narrative is huge when it comes to the final decision. And like Jerry said, the company that put we can't afford it on our own instead of can't. I think that sums it up right there.
That's a real bummer. Yes.
Yeah. And don't miss the deadline either. I would imagine that's probably just as bad as when people miss deadlines.
Yes.
And I'm sure deadlines are very clear. So.
Yeah, they are hard and fast.
Oh, this has been a very educational hour, and I really appreciate you coming on along with Jerry. to talk to me and educate me and hopefully my listeners as well, our listeners as well, about the importance of fire service grants and how they can certainly help bridge that gap between your fire department's budget and what the fire department needs. I think we need to realize that there's some work that goes into applying for the grants, which can be intimidating. However, if done in a methodical manner, maybe done in a group, with a group, people can take different parts of it. I think the reward is certainly worth it. And again, some of the main highlights: don't be afraid to look at local sources of grants. Foundations or local companies can certainly help out. Network with other departments to see how they got their grants. If you know a company that's been successful, talk to them about what they did and how they did it. Be leery of scams that are out there with companies that are looking for money up front to possibly get you a grant, and then you're left paying them with no return. Planning is a huge part of the grant process, knowing what's out there. Start the planning process early. Have good information to back up what you say you need. You can't just say you need it. You have to support why you need it. Know the demographics of your area. Know what's going on in your area. If you're a poor department or a rich department, it doesn't matter. Both can apply for grants. Make sure you got the money to match. If there is a matching requirement, make sure you have those funds available. Make sure you're eligible. Read the fine print. Carefully look at those eligibility requirements. The narrative we just talked about is huge. Have somebody write it that's a talented writer, and then have someone that's maybe not even affiliated with the department or the grant at all review it one last time to catch any typos. But pre-planning is huge, but the payoff for that work will pay huge dividends in the long run. Liz, is there anything else you would like to say before I bid you adieu with another thank you for being with me?
No, it was a pleasure, and hopefully we provided some good resources to some departments tonight. And certainly, if you need anything from us, just let us know.
And please let us know how we can contact you. If somebody's listening and would like to talk to you, email you, tell us a little bit about how they can get a hold of you, and again, how your company can help in the grant process.
Yes, absolutely. So Jerry and I can actually both be contacted at expert@firefighters-paid.com. That is kind of our universal inbox, and you can get myself or Jerry Brandt at expert@firefighters-paid.com. And we're a free online resource for grant questions, grant help. We also have some free assistance available for departments for grant research, consulting, application review, and we also provide grant writing services if that's something that departments need.
Excellent. A great source of information. And Liz, thank you so much for spending the extra half hour here with me after Jerry left us. But I appreciate it. If we do get more questions and that, if people reach out, we may be able to do another show on this, because I'm sure people have questions and information that they need that maybe we didn't get a chance to provide them tonight. So if you would pass on to Jerry my thanks, but also leave it open-ended that maybe we can do another show down the road.
Hey, that sounds great. I'm an avid podcaster myself, so I love podcasts, and they're so useful. So we'd be happy to do that. And thanks so much for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you again so much for being with us. And I just can't say how much I appreciate it enough. So thank you so much, Liz, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, there you have it in a nutshell over the last hour, some real important grant information. Grants are hugely important to many departments, but also can be a huge disappointment to many departments because they take the time to do a grant application and put the effort in and get denied. And maybe some of the points she provided and Jerry provided tonight can maybe help you refine your process just a little bit more. Maybe take an extra day or to write that narrative. Maybe read the requirements just a little bit more thoroughly, just to be a little better prepared to apply for the grant. Maybe a little bit of awareness of, hey, there might be grant opportunities right in your backyard. It doesn't have to be FEMA. It doesn't have to be the SAFER grant. It doesn't have to be the Assistance to Firefighter grant. Yes, those big programs are great, but quite possibly there's a program or a grant opportunity right in your own backyard. Something just to be aware of. So I'm very, very thankful that they were able to spend some time with me tonight. If you have any questions, please reach out to them. Feel free to get a hold of me. I'm going to spend just a couple minutes here at the end of the show, again, reminding you that if you'd like to reach out to me, please feel free to email me at tamerrill63 at AOL.com. Again, tamerrill, MERRILL, the number 63 at AOL.com. Or friend me on my Professional Volunteer Fire Department Facebook page and send me a message that way, because I have quite an active professional volunteer page that I'm always updating and putting some good information on. And I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what's going on in your neck of the woods. And speaking of things going on, I'd be remiss if I didn't just take a minute again to acknowledge that just this past Sunday was the 15th anniversary of the September 11th attacks, and I hope in some way, shape, or form your department or yourself personally took some moments of silence to remember almost 3,000 of the victims of 9/11, and including 343 brother and sister firefighters from New York. You know, we can never really get over it. It's gonna remain with us for the rest of our lives. But it impacted so many people. You know, the surviving family members who continue to grieve, those who survive but continue to get sick at seemingly increasingly accelerated rate, the cancer that is taking these 9/11 survivors, the cancer that's just ravaging their ranks today. It is so important to remember them, to keep them in our thoughts, to keep them in our prayers, to support programs that will help and support them. But the bottom line, and you've heard it, it's so cliche, but it needs to be embraced, especially by firefighters, especially by professional firefighters. Never forgetting means never forgetting. And we can never forget the sacrifices that were made that day and continue to be made today. So I hope in some way, shape, or form, you and your department took some time to remember those tragic events and the people affected and continue to be affected by the events of September 11th. Hey, I mentioned that tonight's program, again, has been sponsored by Honeywell and Kevlar DuPont, and we're so thankful to them. And again, they are sponsoring a scholarship for 20 firefighters to attend FDIC 2017 in Indianapolis from April 24th to the 29th next year. Again, FDIC is the premier firefighting event. It is the largest, one of the largest in the world, and it is the place to go for the latest, the greatest, and the best fire training available anywhere. And if you would like information on how to possibly get a scholarship, there's information, links through the fire engineering website, or you can Google FDIC 2017. You can Google 2017 FDIC Scholarship Program. You can nominate a member of your department or a firefighter you know to get the scholarship, someone who you think is deserving. It requires just some basic information. Tell us why you think this firefighter has made a remarkable contribution to the local fire service in their community, and possibly they could get one of the 20 scholarships to FDIC 2017. And again, we thank our sponsor, Honeywell and DuPont Kevlar, for doing that for us. I will be at FDIC 2017. I look forward to meeting many of you there. Every year I meet people that listen to the show, that are supporters of our message. And again, my class will be on Monday, April 24th from 1:30 till 5:30. It's a 4-hour class. Put together a presentation based on this, what we're talking about every 6 weeks on this show, and that's the professional volunteer fire department and our great volunteer fire service. And again, how I'd like to remind everybody that professional has nothing to do with earning a paycheck. It has everything to do with delivering competent and compassionate service, taking care of our customers and our own members as well. But I like to point out in my class, I like to remind you here tonight, that title professional is not automatically assigned. It must be earned, and it must continue to be earned, and it covers all aspects of the organization, firematically for sure, but also administratively. As I said, inside and outside the organization, how we treat our members, how we treat the public, how we support our people, and how we take care of the customer. And I love teaching that class and presenting it and sharing stories and learning from people in the audience who can continue to educate me about what it means to be a professional. And I'd love to see you in my class at FDIC 2017 or out in your area. I've been taking my presentation all over. I'm going to be up in Old Forge, New York, as a matter of fact, this Saturday, presenting at the Old Forge Fire School up in the beautiful Adirondack Mountains. I'll be doing my presentation for the Old Forge Fire School this weekend, and I'm greatly looking forward to it. I'll be in the New York area through the months of September doing several other presentations. And it's all geared toward the professional volunteer fire department. And I like to talk about building blocks that we can implement in our volunteer firehouses to help shape, to help modify, to help enhance, or help create, or if we're fortunate to already be a professional operation, how to uphold it, how we all have a duty and an obligation to uphold it. And one of the building blocks that I talk about in my presentation is called preparedness, about being as best prepared as you can be when you wear the title firefighter. And you know what? September is National Preparedness Month. It's sponsored by FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and it's designed to serve as a reminder that we all must take action to prepare now and throughout the whole year to be prepared for any type of emergency that could affect us, where we live, where we work, where we are visiting. It encourages people to take steps to prepare for emergencies. It helps them by giving information on how they can be better prepared. And I would encourage you to Google National Preparedness Month. It's a great tool, and it provides great tools, I should say, to help you be better prepared, but it also provides you with tools on how to be connected with your community, how to engage your community, which is one of the building blocks of the professional volunteer fire department, to show that you're interwoven with your community, that you're there to help them and to give them ideas on how they can help themselves, because that really helps in the overall professional equation. And speaking of being prepared, as I mentioned, that's another one of my building blocks that I talk about. Prepared means you, as a firefighter in your hometown volunteer fire department, you are prepared to do the job that's expected of you. Understanding that we have all different levels of jobs and responsibilities in our volunteer firehouse. But whatever your particular role is, from the newest member to the most senior member, everybody has an obligation and a duty as a professional firefighter to be prepared. If you're a driver, you're prepared to drive the rig. You know the pumping operation of that rig. If you're a driver of the light rescue or the ambulance, you're familiar with the layout of the equipment. You're familiar with how the vehicle handles. If you're an interior firefighter, you're prepared to be an interior firefighter. If you're outside firefighter, exterior scene support, you're prepared to operate to the level that's expected of you. If you're a brand new probationary member, you're prepared by going through the apparatus and having an understanding of how the layout of the compartments are. Maybe not understanding yet how these tools work and what the equipment's all about, but knowing where things are in the apparatus around the firehouse. You see, being prepared applies to everybody in the volunteer firehouse, and everybody has a duty to be prepared. If you're a fire police officer or somebody in charge of traffic control, you're prepared by having the right equipment, by understanding the procedures that are in place to direct traffic. You get the picture? Being prepared means being prepared to rise to the occasion, whatever helmet you wear in your volunteer firehouse. And I really, really am passionate about that. I'm passionate about the fact that we are firefighters and we are professional firefighters. And I want to thank everyone who continues to contact me. Please, again, reach out to me on Facebook, the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. Email me at tamerrill63@aol.com. I'm on Twitter, and you can certainly get a hold of me. I love to hear from firefighters and talk about what's going on. So, again, reach out, talk to me, let me know what's going on. But the bottom line is, we can all be professionals. We should all be professionals. And I want to thank you very much for listening in tonight. And I will be back on the air in November, on Tuesday, November 8th. And we will have another great show then. And remember, people, that developing, maintaining, and upholding a professional reputation is the duty and the responsibility of all firefighters, paid or volunteer. Be prepared. Be professional. Thanks for listening tonight. God bless.